What's up, everybody? It's George Carmi from Full Press Coverage Commanders. Let's get it on. What's up, everybody? It's George Carmi. I'm here with my man Adam Aniba. How you doing today, bud? How's it going?
I'm great, man. It's always been back to come and chop it up with you, man. It's always a good time.
100%, man. I love talking to Adam. Me and Adam known each other for a couple of years now. I just respect his knowledge. He puts a lot of work in. I know he's drafting and always looking at watching film and grinding. And I was respecting his opinion, and I know it's coming from a good place. So if you guys aren't familiar with Adam, he represents the Burgundy and Gold Report. He has his own webpage. He does his own podcast. He does his own articles that he constantly puts up, and you can definitely check that out. So it's kind of speaking on to that, Adam. What have you been up to, man? What kind of content are you working on? What have you been up to after the draft?
Well, this year I took a little different approach. Just kind of continue the same, film study that I was doing, pre-draft. And so one guy, Sam Howell, he was the one guy I evaluated pre-draft. So, he was the guy who was done on film wise. But, I just spent time with dots and really focus on the offense this offseason. So I put in a full, 8, 11 games based on each prospect, put out, a full scouting report, but like these were just more molded to, their rookie editions that I'm doing. I actually just did an undrafted edition as well. So, through the off season, usually it's a little slow time, but this off season, I can see like people are, asking for it. They're once you go to the YouTubes and you read a little bit about the guys, like you're done. But the thing is, there's so much more to these guys, especially, again, I just wrote about this guy, Will Adams from, Virginia State University.
I love him, and I'm excited about him, actually. Go ahead.
And a lot of people, the first reaction was he got undrafted. So, he got undrafted for a reason. That's like a big comment I get. But I get a lot of people out there, on social media that just have a lot of questions. I think you're just not seeing, some of the local writers, right? They're just going to, with respect to them, they're just kind of reporting on what they know. Mm-hmm. And a guy like him, that's not easy to get film on. But so, a lot of grainy stuff, you probably comp it to high school film, some of those. Yeah. Level small schools, it's not easy, but what I did see from a guy like him is you're talking about one of those leagues. There's a lot of options. Think of like Army, Navy, just like a lot of running. So like a DB that could be really good, but 80% of the time he's in the box tackling. So that's the fun part. This part of the offseason. Every time Washington gets players, I try to attack the film as much as possible. But Jared Patterson last year was 1. I think we're up to like 14 or 15 undrafted free right now. So this is
we have a pretty large class.
Yeah, this is a busy time, and I think everyone's got something different to say. But like I said, my perspective is I'm doing a full scouting report on them. I'm going to go watch their games from last year, whatever I can find on them. What I see their role this year. A lot of people say, "Well, wait till camp," but there's a lot of time, in my opinion, from now to camp. So it's not only about projection; it's just about like what I see and with what Washington already has, how do they fit and how can they go forward? But, I personally, I like what Washington did because I think that a lot of people were upset. They passed on some prospects as I was too. But
sure.
And you see the blueprint that they're running. They're looking at guys, mostly seniors. Some, I think 3 or 4 guys were 5th or 6th
like
years.
Super seniors. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
So, I respect that because these are role players, a lot of these things. So, I really enjoyed this offseason so far. Like I said, I'm in 4 prospects between the drafted and undrafted, but yeah, there's a lot to go. So, it's a fun time for me. I just continued it from the draft rather than just like, taking a break, which I've done last year. So it's very different off season.
Yeah, for sure, man. Keep the momentum going. And to touch on Will Adams, I'm really intrigued by him too. There was an excellent article in The Athletic. I don't know if you caught it or our listeners have caught it. It just talked about HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and basically the deficit they have to overcome in regard to becoming a pro. And it was a great article because it's talked about like the network and how scouting works in the NFL. What I found really interesting was there's a database where basically colleges and coaches and front office people basically share, and basically Big Ten, SEC, so on and so forth. And it's just kind of like a wide array of files that front office people can look at, right? But up until about 2 or 3 years ago, HBCUs weren't even shared amongst the NFL network, amongst the group of owners and front office people. So even if you could be the best prospect in the entire world, you didn't get the opportunity. So that's actually, I just found that really intriguing. It was eye opening to me. And now with Deion Sanders down at Jackson State, and just just conversations happening and just being more open minded, we're starting to see more players come about. So I'm excited about Will Adams. He definitely was an athletic prospect. He looks pretty intriguing, has a great vertical, and he's a big corner. So I hope he makes the team. And you never know, with Washington, we have there are opportunities, especially at the cornerback position, to make the team. So I'm kind of excited about that. So that'd be cool. So going with that, right? So just talking about the draft, you and I, last time we were together, we talked about going into the draft, right? So what are your first impressions after the draft? How do you feel about the team so far? Some of the players that we got, were you happy with it? How do you feel?
It's interesting. It's like, no matter who the coach is, they continue to go through that SEC pipeline. So see the scouting, like, I like to see that. So what that shows me is, they are listening to their scouts, because you're seeing a pattern here. So, after there was some turnover in that department, you're still seeing, the defensive tackle from Alabama, we get a running back from Alabama. So they're still looking at that pipeline. So I really like that. Saying that, I think there was concerns about maybe some of the reaches, but again, after the draft, like, I just talked to as many people as I know, and they were saying that even though it was big reaches to some of us, the defensive tackle and the running back, people were saying that they were going to go within 10 to 15 picks of where we picked them. So although to us, it only takes, two teams to really make a team, maybe overdraft is what we call it. But for me, what I've really separated from myself in is that whole idea of, like, I projected Howell as a late first round, early to the second, and, look where he went. But see, that's not what scouting is about, because teams, I see more and more, are drafting for need than best player available.
I agree with that. That's a fair assessment.
Especially in the class where quarterbacks weren't the hot commodity. I think that really leaned towards that. And I think we saw a lot of that. And I think people are still scratching their heads in New England. But, until Bill Belichick is proven wrong, a guy that I sat down with last year, Kyle Duggar, he got second round. Josh Williams went to Kansas City this year, a guy I sat down with from the HBCU level. So these guys that are coming, like you said, they weren't being shared in the database. What's going on? What I learned this offseason is about NIL deals. That's what I learned.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That has changed the whole landscape, because even in the small school and HBCU level, they're not getting maybe the millions that someone at Alabama might get, like a John Mechie or one of those guys. They're walking away with $2.5 million coming to the NFL at least. Some of these guys are just getting sponsorship for the scholarships. They're getting their housing. They're getting a day-to-day car. So it's little things, but what that does is it puts them on the map, and it gets them opportunities for agents to reach out to them, because if NIL deals are involved, that's when more agents are willing to take a chance. That's what I learned this offseason, because in the past, I think agents are willing to lay out their money, take a chance on a prospect, but now with NIL deals, there's a little more security involved, and what they do, they're the reasons they get it. I think you have to give some credit to the agents, and they're the ones that help some of these schools get on the databases, because it's the marketing involved. And can't lie, Deion Sanders was a huge reason.
Huge.
So I think talent is talent, and what's starting to happen. And we've known each other for a while. It's not about like saying I was first, because there was a lot of people doing this, but Draft Dime and someone like myself, we were the ones that were talking about these prospects, and then now the team, ESPN, the mainstream, really understood now to get on the train. Jim Nagy, with the Senior Bowl. Catch on with it. He explained there's only so many prospects that they can get every year, and he can't see every piece of tape, and he gets so much tape even just mailed into him. So it took more people, gathering at the Senior Bowl to get exposure. So once that, the game's changed. So I think, going from here on out, these guys, the NFL level, as long as they continue to ascend, and I think, we're seeing Darius Leonard in Indianapolis. He was my first HBCU hit, and I think he's a guy that really just changed the landscape of what they're looking for in the NFL. Because in college, the offensive, defensive schemes they're running, they're very vanilla, they're very basic. Like we talked about, Adam, a free safety that we're not really seeing much, because played a lot of teams, facing the run. So I think when they get on the next level, it's kind of a crapshoot, but I think that's where a lot of projecting goes on. And I think that's where measurables do have a big factor, because you want to see, are they a flex player? Are they a guy that's going to be able to jump on special teams and make a difference right away? That's what I see what Washington did, because I can look at all their draft picks, down to their offensive lineman, the type of speed that he has, like how he can make an impact on special teams. So I like what they're doing. I think you're seeing more and more teams doing this. So, it's exciting to see this turnaround. But again, with Washington, it's going to all come down to the quarterback playing the offense, because we can have, solutions
100%, man.
how
100%.
good the defense can be. But, if the offense moves the ball, the defense will do their part.
No, man, it's to your credit. I do give you credit. I know you kind of brought up the fact you're kind of humble about it, about addressing and focusing on HBCUs pretty early on. You were always a small draft prospect guy. That's where you kind of got your roots, and I know that from a couple of years ago. We've been friends for a couple of years now. I know that's how you kind of built that up. So I for sure see that there. It's kind of going on. It's kind of funny. I didn't know we are going down this route with this conversation, but it's true. Like it's really interesting. I also read an article about how NILs have kind of are a barrier right now to HBCUs as well. I don't know if you caught that because let's say, Adam Aniba is a great linebacker, right? He can go to Alabama, can make $4 or $5 million a year, but he might go to a smaller school, might not get that big exposure, so he might be less prone to go that. So there is kind of a discrepancy. And Deion Sanders, actually, I like it's so funny. Like when he was a Cowboy, like 20 years ago, I hated the guy, right? But I love what he's doing. I do respect him as a cornerback. I like what he's doing for just kind of building up his program, and he's advocating for his people. Like he actually had that video. I don't know if everyone remembers, but like he was calling people out. He's like, I had a pro day, and the teams that did not come were the Ravens, the Packers. He was like listing these teams out, and he was basically calling them out for not being exposed there. So that's interesting, which I do think there is a discrepancy, and hopefully that will go away. Quick question before we dive into Washington. NILs, right? Do you think that's preventing, like, we're seeing some super seniors. I know that's a lot to do with COVID and all that stuff with the extra exposure. But do you think as a college player, do you think there's less incentive to rush to the NFL now with NIL deals? Like, do you think they might be able to stay one more year, maybe kind of build their skills a little bit more? Like, they don't have to chase the money because it's not going to go away if they're injured. Do you think that's going to change the college landscape, or how do you feel about that?
The guys, a couple guys I talked to that I didn't put out, reports on them, but I did talk to more than a few that took advantage of the extra year of eligibility.
Yeah.
And I asked them a similar question. If this was, the following year without COVID being involved, would you go to the NFL? And they all said, yeah. So
Okay.
I think that COVID had a lot to do with it. It put a scare in a lot of people. I talked to a couple guys that lost a few family members, so it hit home.
Yeah.
Their first thought is they needed to get a paycheck. They needed to get in the NFL, and they needed to support their family just in case, because there's people that that really believe that it's not the end of this, and if this happens again, they need to be prepared financially. So I do think that there's going to be a lot less of these five, these super seniors, depending on who it is. But I think the bigger colleges, I think there'll be less of those. It's just it was a circumstance, but the NIL deals, they're changing the whole landscape. But the thing is, it's already happening. Like the SECs and the big divisions, they're getting the big money falling through them. So I feel exactly that they'll trump that, and players are going to chase the money. But we saw with Deion Sanders, he was able to get the top recruit in the country.
He did from Florida State, the running back. I saw that actually.
So if we can get more of these former star players, even maybe coaches, go on to that level, I think we can see more production like Deion Sanders had, to be honest with you, because I don't think that he's, the greatest coach. I think he's a great motivator.
He is great motivator, good. Like he's leader of men. I can see that for sure.
Like Ray Lewis, like, that's somebody I could see, if he can get into, an HBCU program, I could see him attracting a ton.
Shoot. Yeah.
So, those are things that I hope we see. And, this whole XFL coming in, don't sleep on that. That's hopefully going to be a farm system. That's what I've been,
with Dwayne Johnson kind of promoting it and pushing it a little bit. It's interesting. I think I saw a deal that ESPN's going to be broadcasting the games, or it's fully powered. I mean, they're always looking for years and years. They've been looking for a spurring league, kind of a league to kind of get the NFL going year round, and something's going to hit eventually. I've been trying to get in the USFL, and it's kind of hard for me right now. I don't know if you're feeling it at all, but like XFL, I mean, we'll see. I'm interested in that. So, but let's get back to Washington. It's a Washington podcast. We can talk about this. So, the draft. We saw some interesting things. I think the team they found players in the early rounds that will contribute early, right? We have some super seniors, some captains, some leaders, some people that are have refined specific roles for Washington. I think will be plug and play. So I do see that need that you were talking about. Like Washington kind of drafted for need this year. So, but let's talk about it. Like Greg Cosell, who's on the John Common podcast the other day, he had some pretty glowing reviews. I was kind of surprised by how effusive he was about Jahan Dotson and Phil Mathis and all these people that we're going to talk about. Let's talk about the first round. So Jahan Dotson, are you high on him? Are we happy about the trade going from 11 to 16? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
I'll say I think a lot of people were bringing up, Chris Olave, and
Mhm.
I am neck and neck. I think I was one of the few people. I didn't have that USC wide receiver as high as everyone else. I
Yeah,
had him.
London. Mhm.
I had Treylon Burks, Dotson, and Olave neck and neck. So to
Mhm.
me, it wasn't a reach at all. So for them to be able to move back and still get the value was great. In saying that, there's Jamison Williams and then Hamilton. Those were the
Mhm.
two guys that
I
was.
like Jameson Williams a lot for sure.
And those were my big three, and I was hoping to get one of those. So Dotson, I don't look at it as a consolation because not only did they, to me, he's the best route runner in this class. Like,
Okay. Yeah, he is. I can see that.
and you're talking about Olave. If you put Dotson, in my opinion, on OSU, he's neck
Mhm.
and neck with Wilson. He's not, and
Mhm.
Olave is going to be wide receiver 3 because Dotson, he's just spectacular. Like people talk about the Santana Moss comparisons. I see a little bit of that, but I see Steve Smith because Steve Smith was a tougher, grittier kind of guy and just made those tough catches. So I think sky's the limit with him. I'd like to see him add a little bit of weight, but what I
Yeah.
really like about him is he takes over games.
Yeah.
Unlike all these receivers in this class, they had, pretty good quarterback play, offense scheme for them. Dotson, the PSU offense, they haven't had a quarterback since we've been alive. I think it was Kerry
Yeah.
for the last decent ones, and that's not saying much. So
Yeah.
you're talking about Dotson single-handedly making plays, getting double teamed, getting pushed off his routes. Teams really getting aggressive with him, and he's still coming up with always one of the best players on the field. So
Mhm.
that's what I like about him, and I see why they draft him. So if you're able to trade back, get him, and still get additional picks, man, that's huge value right there.
Yeah, I thought it was a home run to be honest with you. I was watching the draft and I was like, talk. We all talked about the draft for sure, and I was like, you know what, going back to New Orleans at 16 is a steal, right? You're not going to basically ruin anything by going back 5 picks. You can see what Washington envisioned. I think Washington had like almost like a nightmare scenario, though. I thought they were like, you know what, Jameson Williams, Olave, Hamilton, one of these guys are going to be over between these next 5 picks, and bang, 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 they started coming off the board. But I think what they saw Dotson, they were comfortable with him because I do feel like he's refined. I feel like he's a nuanced route runner. I feel like he's tough. He has a good catch radius for his size. He has great character. He's a good leader, and I think he's going to play right into week 1. I think he's going to be on the field, and it's going to be interesting, man. I'm really rooting for him, and I think he's going to provide like a pretty nice little element to our team because, in my opinion, I think Samuel, Mclaurin, and Dotson are kind of interchangeable to an extent, right? Like I mean, you'd assume McLaurin's the X, and you can kind of look at bumping either Dotson or Samuel with the Z. But I can see Samuel more of it's a slot position, but you never know, man. The best part about it is you can kind of move them around. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, where do you see all 4 of them meshing together? Even I'm throwing in Diami Brown at this point now too.
Right. What I think with Dotson, what I like to see is them get him involved in a slot early on, because
Okay,
Samuels, you can get him in and out of the slot. I think,
he's used to it.
yeah, healthy, which it's all indications he are. Is I think you're just going to get him your motion all over the field, in the
Mhm.
backfield, just in bunch formation. But again, with Dotson, he's a savvy route runner right now, and I think you get him from the slot. You have him run 3 or 4, from the route tree, and you're good to go. I think
Mhm.
that the guy that he's shown the kind of hands that will give me confidence in playing him as a rookie. I think
Mhm.
that's a question when you're playing
I
with a rookie.
agree.
And
I
I
agree.
understand why when they drafted a wide receiver, that they zeroed in on him because I think that they probably had their eye on Wilson. To me, it
Mhm.
was Wilson, or then they were dropped down to Dotson. And like I said, I don't see a huge drop off from those two. I
I
actually see
agree. Actually, I really do agree to that. I
Dotson
like for good.
fast. That's all I really take away from those two. But otherwise, I see they both fight for the ball on 50-50s. That's what I love about them.
I
And
agree.
big guys. And I think people get caught up, with their weight. Man, both guys play much bigger than they are.
I agree, man. I'm 100% like we're on the same page 100%. I feel like Dotson is kind of like a mixture of Olave and Wilson, right? Like basically like he is that nuanced route runner, he's that professional route runner on day 1 like Olave, but then he also has a larger catch rate. It's like Wilson, right? Is he as elite maybe in those traits that those guys have? Maybe not, but he's pretty damn close. And honestly, at this point it's negligible, right? It depends on scheme fit and coaching and just kind of putting him in the right spot. So Dotson's good enough. Can Scott Turner basically do what's right with him? We'll kind of see how that goes out. So Speaking of, we'll stay with offense right now before we go into Mathis. So we got Dotson, we got Wentz, we got Brian Robinson. How'd you feel about the Brian Robinson pick? Were you happy with him? I think you're an Alabama fan, right? So you kind of got some exposure to him. What is Washington getting with Brian Robinson?
Yeah, see, like I said, I'm an Alabama fan, but to watch the games, it's not like going back and really just narrowing on him, because I'll admit, watching Alabama games, I was watching the receivers.
Yeah, man, stacked. I mean, rightfully so, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So when I'm watching back him, man, his yak, he's yards after contact. That's what I love about him. And I think Gibson, although he's capable of that, he took a beating doing that, because you're talking about, because he has the same running back body type. He came out of Memphis, and he was not used to that. He's used to catch and run. Maybe take a hit sideline, that's it. But Robinson, he's used to that. But what I love about him is he waited his turn. He played behind some of the best at Alabama. Again, fifth-year guy. But when he got his shot, you could say, well, he benefited from a great offensive scheme, good offensive line in front of him, but a hell of his lot of his yards came off yards after contact. So bulldozing type, and I think Washington fans, especially some of the old school ones, have been clamoring for this, because days of having this bell cow, like running him into the ground. I think you're seeing with Barkley and the Giants. Granted, they didn't go too hard with him. I think it's a trend we're going to see less of. And I think if they brought back J.D. McKissick. So you have those three guys. I think you could just do a lot of things, because Robinson, one thing that's underrated about him, he's a good pass catcher.
He is.
Gil, Gibson, and McKissick. But, so you're losing. And that's what we'll talk about the tight ends. I feel the same way about the tight ends. No matter what personnel you're lining up right now, run, pass. That's what I think we're going to see with Wentz, because I think that there's a misconception that if you're going to do some, RPO, things like that, your quarterback's got to be able to get you yards. It's more about just opening up the field.
I agree. Exactly. Just pausing the linebackers. I agree.
You could use that. There's so many things you can do with them, because again, what do personnel is not going to be giveaways. Like, when they had Jeremy Sprinkle on the field, pretty much everybody knew.
Run. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%.
So, that's what I love. I think the depth that they've added, again, it's not the sexy stuff. I think there was a lot of prospects on the board, especially, particularly guys that I evaluated. That
Brisker and all those guys, Mumon, Anderson,
potential guys that could start. That was my thing. But the thing is, I'm not building this team. I'm evaluating these guys. So it's totally different things. So I can't complain. With Robinson, especially Dotson. These were guys that were on my radar. If we had another month, I assure you would have got to those guys and definitely more.
100. You just ran out of time. I'm with you.
Unlike most people, I don't want draft season just to wrap up. I like it just to keep going.
It's fun, man. It's a good time. It's definitely it gets your energy going. I feel you, man. I'm with you. And going back to Robinson, I thought that was a good pick. I thought it was. I think I like the draft. I think Washington's draft is kind of a meat and potatoes draft, kind of like a team building draft. And I think Brian Robinson will add and contribute. Like you and I think you, me, Josh Taylor, we all did a live NFL, like we did a running 4-hour draft process the night we got Antonio Gibson. And we were excited that he actually got drafted. And I still like him. I'm not discounting him, but I think he needs to be relieved a little bit. He needs to be kind of used in spurts, because he's not that bell cow running back. No offense to him, but nowadays no one really is. You got to kind of spare that out a little bit. And Brian Robinson, as you kind of alluded to, he has a little pop, right? He averaged 5 yards per carry at Alabama, right? So, I mean, granted, they have so many good wide receivers, number 1 overall pick quarterbacks. He wasn't an optimal situation, but he did what he's supposed to do. And I think Brian Robinson knows who he is as well. He knows that, if I have a little opening, he has enough wiggle to get by the linebacker, maybe at the safety, but he can just 5, 6 yards, 7 yards, boom, he can pound it out. And I like that. And he is a capable wide receiver, 35 catches. He's not going to blow it up. He's not going to, get to that second level and take it to the house. But at the same time, he'll do what he needs to. And I think we both agreed offline. He's a pretty good pass blocker too. I think he'll be on the field pretty quickly. Right. So I like the fact it's just an added tool. It's an added tool to the kit. We can't just always win by passing the ball. Every once in a while, we're going to have on our 17-game schedule, we're going to have a team that's the 31st ranked defense and rush defense and stuff like that. And we can basically just kind of pound it, dude. Just run the ball down their throats. And I'm excited about that. So I do like the added like out of depth. I think Washington did a good job. Our quarterbacks are pretty deep now. We have Wentz, Howell, and Heineke. Maybe they're not elite. We'll see where it goes. We're gonna go. Our tight ends will be our next conversation in a second. They're starting to develop a little bit. Running backs are starting to get pretty good. Wide receivers are getting pretty good. So our offense is starting to stack up, and it's all about coming together now. Like it seems like we're developing something, but now it's gonna be chemistry. And honestly, Scott Turner, we got to see if he can actually, he has all the tools now. Can he make it happen? So we'll see. Let's go for it, man. So tight end. So Logan Thomas coming off of an injury. Let's start off with him. Do you think he has a bounce back year? Do you how high are you on Logan Thomas? Do you think he's like a buildable piece? Do you think he's going to be kind of like we saw the best of him already? Or what do you think's going on with him?
Oh, no doubt. No, I think he's still got a lot more to give.
Okay.
Maybe not necessarily what he was doing, because I think he was the focal point and no one else. But I think Bates, I expect him, he's becoming an overall tight end. Like what he was doing when he was in college wasn't, the traditional pass catching tight end, but on the other hand, he wasn't, a great blocker either. So he's really getting well-rounded in all of that. But, adding Cole Turner. So now you've got those guys. I think what that's going to do for Thomas is it's going to allow him to ease in slowly. I think he's going to be tight end one. There's no question about it. But that relieves a lot of pressure, because I think Bates, they can move him to tight end one on certain packages if they're going to go one tight end. If they go two tight end, they can even have the luxury to, bring in Turner. So I think that they have a lot of guys that are going to be interchangeable and a lot of size. That's the thing that I'm probably most excited right now is they bring there, because when you get in the red zone, that it gets really tight and bunched up in there. And if you have a bunch of guys that are just tall and just can go up and get it, like we saw with Logan Thomas, that's exactly what they look for in the rookie when they drafted him. I think it's funny how similar those guys are, because people think Logan Thomas is not that fast, just like Cole Turner. A lot of people get caught up in the speed, but again, you just got to look at where did they make their bread and butter in college, and as a late round pick, he fits in perfect for what they're looking to do.
I agree, man. I think it's going to be a pretty good combination. Obviously, listening to podcasts and reading up on them, I kind of like the idea of having a two tight end set, maybe having Logan Thomas with his hand in the ground, maybe being more of that inline guy. He'll block and then kind of break off, and have that big slot with Cole Turner, because he's not much of a blocker right now, but he is a pretty big target, pretty large catch radius as well. And from what I understand of him, he's more of like a zone breaker as well. Like he needs to still develop his like route running and maybe beating NFL coverage, but I think he'll find some holes in the zone with his large catch radius, make it happen. So I'm excited about the opportunity there. And I think that he will provide. I think he's going to provide for us too. He might not be, maybe first year, maybe 20, 30 catch guy. We'll see something like that, but it's gonna be interesting. He might get a couple touchdowns this year. So we'll see. It's kind of a random question. So speaking of tight ends, what does that mean for Sammis Reyes? Do you think he's still going to make a team, or do you think he's on the chopping block, or do you think he's still kind of a prospect to keep around? What do you think?
I think that I don't think you can give him a roster spot. I think right now, granted, it's only a fifth round, but I think with what Cole Turner did, 19 touchdowns in the last 2 years, that's if you're looking for production in the red zone, that's what you got. With Sammy Reyes, you're still talking about years of development here. So even as talking about a guy who has years of experience over him. So that's down to. And I think unless he's, from behind the scenes, we don't really know the type of improvement, but I think you tend to hear the buzz come out of camp and things like that if somebody's really stepping up. And I think he's doing all the things he needs to do to be a good pro, but I think a year or two on the practice squad and then, go from there. But it's a big transition from never playing football to go playing professional football. So
I agree.
I think it was a necessity thing because they had depth issues. And I think any other year, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it happens. I think he's on the practice squad otherwise. So I think
agree.
Set themselves up perfect. They go into the season with, Thomas, even though, he's coming off that rehab, they have the option to run him slow, because I think with Bates, the pick they invested in him, that's high enough that you want that guy to get, a lot more snaps. So by getting Turner on this point, I think, there was other guys on the board I liked as well, but I totally, after watching this, I was down on him because I'm not a Carson Strong fan, but, after watching games, man, he's a big reason Carson Strong, had his touchdown count, because that guy, that one thing about he doesn't drop balls. and at 6'6", he utilizes every bit of that length. So, having him in the red zone, especially in the NFC East, some of those games, in the Meadowlands when it gets windy, I think that's going to be a good weapon to have.
For sure, man, for sure. So before we get to the defense, let me throw out a question for you, kind of out of left field. Where do you think Washington's offense stacks up in the NFC East? How do you think they compare to maybe the Eagles and the Cowboys and Giants? What do you think about that?
I think over the Giants for sure, no question. But man, the Eagles got really good.
Okay.
It's scary how good they got. Kenneth Gainwell, which is like their third run guy. I did a hard film study when he came out, and people aren't even talking about him. And that's a guy that's another flex receiver, just like Gibson coming out of there. So, they have weapons on the back end that people aren't even talking about. They're scary right now. But their quarterback isn't scary. So that's what it comes down. He's a guy, again, I was an Alabama fan. I watched him there. I watched him, when he transferred to Oklahoma. And I'm not scared of him. I think that they need to have someone like Carson Wentz. Granted, he's on the back end of his career. Maybe, we've seen the best of him. But I think you put him in Philly right now, that's a team that can be a real contender, because I think you have weapons across the board. That defense is solid. But Hurts, I just don't know. But Dallas goes with Dak, so it all comes down. They lost a receiver, but then they upgraded. So that's one thing they always do. They never lose a step. But I'm right now with Zeke Elliott. He's a guy I think is one of the most overrated guys in the league. Even if I was
for sure,
the most overrated, overpaid. So I think something's going to happen with him, not this year, next year. But Pollard, I really like him. Another Memphis.
I like Pollard. Pollard's good.
Backup. He's a rotational guy with him. So. I think right now, to me, Philadelphia and Washington have probably highest hopes, I should say. I don't know about the best, the best in the division, but those are the ones that I think, the closest. I think when we play them, that we're going to have a shootout. I think when it comes to Dallas and the Giants, I think it'll probably be closer on the ground game, maybe. But I think when they go against Philadelphia, it's just going to be fun to watch.
Beautiful thing, right? Beautiful thing. Washington offense, something we don't necessarily tie together very often. So we're there. Exactly. So let's kind of pivot a little bit. We're about halfway through the show. Let's talk about our defense, right? So second round pick, number 47. There were definitely some intriguing prospects there. Going into the draft, there's a lot of talk of linebacker, maybe a cornerback, maybe a safety. Jaquan Brisker was on the board at 47. That was an intriguing pick. Chad Muma, Troy Anderson, Phil Mathis. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know much about him going in. I heard the name, but didn't really know much about him going into 47. I did some research now, and I kind of feel better about it. But what are your thoughts? How do you feel about him?
Great year last year. There was 9 sacks he had. So it was definitely a breakout year. Again, a lot of people attribute it to the talent he had around him, and it's a statement. And again, there was more questions about overdrafting him. He could have been available in the 3rd or 4th round. But one thing I saw this year that's kind of cool on Twitter now, a lot of agents were coming out post-draft.
Sticking up for him.
Listen, my couple teams that I was talking to, they were going to pick him up 10 picks later. So, a value, I don't think that it was a reach. But again, some of the guys on the board. But, I wrote an article shortly after that about Cole Holcomb. I think that it's not a necessity thing. I think they really do see him as their Mike. So if you do see him as your Mike, you're not going to use a second rounder on a linebacker, no matter how much, we'd love the Chad Mumas and Andersons. Those were 2 guys that, I did deep dives on, and they would have fit in perfect. But I think that they've got a definite plan for Holcomb. I think Davis, everyone, just because he's not a Mike linebacker doesn't mean he's not going to be the best linebacker on this team when it all said and done. But for right now, I think people need to realize Cole Holcomb, he's the statesman right now. And I think they like what he can do, football IQ wise, situational. And he showed enough coverage, gains last year that makes them comfortable in that aspect. And again, after I watch back, watch some of the games, I understand, some of the mistakes he made. But man, there was a lot of plays that he really stepped up and made plays when, there was no play to be had and he got involved. So I think that they're going to live and die with that decision. It's going to be, because right now there's nobody really behind him. There's not a whole lot of depth right now. It's a lot of undrafted free agents, Mayo. But I just don't know if they can sustain an injury. So if Holcomb or Davis goes down, I think they'll be in trouble. So, we'll wait and see. I would have liked this. They had multiple chances to add one of those linebackers and they passed. So that'll be something to watch.
That's true. I'm definitely a Holcomb guy, actually. I liked him as well. I think he's kind of underrated athletically. People kind of look at him, see the mullet, kind of discredit him like he's like kind of like a, whatever. They don't take him seriously for whatever reason it is. But he is pretty athletic. He's pretty quick. I do find him pretty intelligent. And I do find that with Mathis, it was a forward thinking pick, right? So if Deron Payne technically leaves, if he leaves next year, we have somewhat of a replacement for him this year. We could use Mathis with that 5-man front to kind of nose tackle two gapper to kind of free up the linebackers to kind of let them run loose. It'll be kind of interesting to see that too. So it will be interesting. I do want to see if Davis can take a step forward and Holcomb can do a pretty good job. Our defense might be pretty legit. So I do like that. But let me throw this question at you. So clearly, linebacker was potentially in need, cornerback was potentially in need. Would you pursue any free agents at any one of those slots? And right now, this is off the top of my head. You might know more than me, but AJ Klein, Dante Hightower. There's a couple other linebackers. I think Alex Johnson from the Broncos is available too. There's a couple people that are floating around. Would you pursue any of those linebackers? Or do you kind of want to let camp play out for now and kind of see what do you want to do?
No, I think they really should pursue. Like I said, what happens if someone goes down? I think they had Bostic in the past. He's not someone I would bring back, but I think a couple of the guys that you talked about, I think they should definitely look in that because it doesn't. You're not talking about anything breaking the bank, and the more talent, the more leadership, veteran experience. I just think that only helps guys like Holcomb and Davis. So
I agree.
they really, to me, it's that position, and we'll see what happens. I'm about to dive into Percy Butler's film. I'm hearing really about him, about his ability to be a true free safety. Because again, I wrote about McCain prior to Washington bringing him in, and what I liked about him was his versatility. As a slot guy, cover deep field. But the thing about him is he a full-time free safety? For the next 2-3 years in Washington, and I'm not sure I believe that. So you're going to look at that in the free agent market as well. I'm not sure because right now that's another issue with depth because Everett, that sad situation.
Very sad.
A good special teams contributor. So now we're looking at guys like Percy Butler, potentially Adams, who they just signed, for guys that are going to step up in that depth role on special. But there's a couple positions that if a guy goes down, they could be in a lot of trouble because we saw last year, Curl, he's a guy that we want to see him a free safety and strong safety bounce around. Everyone talks about the Buffalo nickel, but people need to understand about that. Some of that was due to necessity, and that wasn't just something that they wanted to do. It's actually, I believe it was below 35%, if I'm not mistaken. So, would they bring back Landon Collins, for that role, for them to be able to run that? I'm not sure. I think that his ego might not be able to let him, give it up because I think he believes he can be a strong safety on another team. So I think that there's enough time that they should add a few players because, like I said, you added depth. Your receiver group is deep. I think, your cornerbacks, that's something that is a question mark as well. But there's more than a few free agents out there right now that you can get for bargain prices because right now nobody's getting $5-10 million contracts.
No.
Veteran minimum or so. So I think that they need to pursue that avenue. But I think you usually start to see that they wait till camp gets going. It's really see times they want to see what these guys can do. If they can step up, if they can shine, then they can, pass on giving some of that guaranteed money up that they want to, save for later in the season. Because that's another thing we have to remember. Things happen in, the week 2, 3. I think after week 1, if they sign someone, they don't have to guarantee their contract for the whole year. So I think that here is, they try to hold out as long as they can. But I think if you need guys now, you should definitely, hit the market. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think it's coming around the corner too. I think from what I remember, there's OTAs next week. It's going to be OTAs. I think there's maybe 2 different series of that. OTAs are more of book work and kind of walkthroughs on the field, nothing really too intense. And then in mid-June, they actually have mandatory mini camp from June 14th to the 16th, if I remember correctly. And obviously with Landon Collins and that post June 1st cut, we're going to see some more money coming out and more movement coming out about as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Washington does. Before we dive into more of the defensive prospects, let's kind of talk about free agency one more time. In your opinion, what do you think the biggest hole is on the team still? Would it be cornerback, safety, linebacker? I know, just throwing some names up there, give you some time to process too, is, there are some cornerbacks that are out. There's James Bradbury, there's Trey Waynes, there's Chris Harris, he's a slot guy. Xavier Rhodes, I think, is available as a cornerback. We talk about the linebackers. What direction would you go? What's Washington's biggest deficit, and is there any names that you're interested in?
I think a lot of people. I even was intrigued when Bradbury became available, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people were saying, Washington has a bunch of outside guys, so you might want to look at maybe talked about slots just now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but the thing is, I think, with St. Just, I'm not sure that's a guy. If you ask me any player that I'm down on the team, that's who it is right now, because again, it rings memories of Jordan Reed, these multiple concussions. It never goes the right way. It usually goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right now, cornerback is, we're looking at some of the guys they got late. The Christian Holmes from Oklahoma State. I think that's somebody that, they believe can be, maybe a sleeper pick, but unless somebody like that, can step up early. Danny Johnson, he's a guy that,
I like Danny Johnson. Mm-hmm.
he's a good role player, but that's a back end guy.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And so if I'm on the spot, I think cornerback is definitely that's position. Bradbury, the Ron Rivera connection, that can't be ignored, but I think he'll wait to see if he can get a little more money. I think Washington won't willing to pay, what he's looking for, because I think, he'll still be able to get in that $8-10 million range, but the longer he's out there, the less he'll get. But if you're going to get anybody, it would be him to me.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so let's go back to basically the defense, right? So we talked about our late end of the draft picks, right? We talked about Mathis, we talked about Percy Butler. Was there anybody in the later rounds you were keen on? I know you started doing some of your write-ups. Like, what are these late round picks that you're kind of rooting for? Any back end players you like?
Chris Paul was a guy late in the process.
Okay.
With looking. Just a little bit of what I saw, I'm looking forward to getting his foot. I saw a game and a half, not even a full game, but man, I just like how he moves.
Okay.
I like his explosiveness. Can he be a swing guy? I'm not sure. That's why I'm looking forward to getting that film. But
Mm-hmm.
he's a guy that really intrigues me, because I think when they let go of Flowers,
Mm-hmm.
I started to get a lot more concerned with the interior depth, because right now there really is none.
What's interesting? I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't know if you saw this, but Wes Martin was actually he was released by his team. Washington put a waiver claim in to bring him back into DC, but then I think another team basically was ahead. I think maybe the Jaguars might have got him ahead, and basically he's got taken up. But like, it was kind of funny. I think the team is still worried about depth as well. So sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Yeah. Glad you mentioned him, because he was a guy I watched coming out, and I don't know, if it was coaching or exactly happened, but he definitely disappointed. So I'm actually surprised that they tried to make a run for him again. But I think that if you look at Carolina and how they treated offensive line over there as well, they do believe that the interior, with the exception of Norwell, he got paid when he was over there. They brought him back.
Yeah.
I think feel that they can really replace those positions. The whole offensive line, I think that's their belief system. I'm not sure I'm quite there with them, because I think Leno, Cosme, I think that these are guys that can be more than serviceable.
Mm-hmm.
But are they guys that are going to be top 10 in the league? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. With a lack, I thought that we might see an interior guy or even an outside guy maybe selected around that 4th, 5th round range, and they didn't. So I think if Carson Wentz can stay healthy, I think we'll look at it as, a smart offseason. But if, we saw Fitzpatrick early on and he was out, if that happens, the battle between, Taylor and Sam will be, all fans are talking about. And I don't think that's the ideal situation we want to see this year.
Hopefully not. Hopefully Wentz performs pretty well. We're in good shape right there. That's my ideal situation there. Let's talk about maybe three more questions. We can wrap it up. So, speaking of 5th round picks, speaking of Howell, how do you feel about him? Did you actually do an article on? Did you write up on him or no? Got to eval? Like, go ahead.
He was one of my 24 that we actually did select. I just did it so late in the draft. Again, when I valued him late 1st, early 2nd, you can check, it's on my website. But what I just loved about him is, if you looked about him when De'Ami Brown was there, and Daz Newsome and the talent they had at running back, they were able to really spread it around. You were really able to see the best out of Howell. But you took away those weapons, and I think a lot of people are down on him. But man, he turned into a dual threat. He really
yeah
didn't do it all. And I think people really were shocked that, he could, put up those kind of scrambling numbers. But what I loved about it is he just showed he can do it. But now this guy's a natural passer. He brings his baseball background, and I just love it. The ball just jumps out of his hand. I think that out of all the quarterbacks they have right now on the roster, to me, he's a guy that I have high hopes for the future. I think Wentz, no matter what happens, I think that's a 2-3 year guy, because it's just too many injuries, too many surgeries. I shouldn't say injuries, because he has been pretty
good. He actually maintains and plays even though he's hurt. But exactly. But go ahead.
Surgeries are concerning me. So long term, I think best case scenario 2-3 is Howell is the future of this team, because I think people get all caught up that, well, if he was so good, he would have got drafted earlier. I don't think so, because I think Malik Willis too is another guy that's really believe it or not, I think he's in a really good situation over there. And I think once he gets on the field, he's going to show that too. So it doesn't matter where they get drafted, it matters with fit. And I think in Washington, forget the De'Ami Brown connection. I think you come into a situation where they're just loaded at wide receiver and tight ends. He never had any real tight ends at UNC. They just didn't utilize him. So you put all that into motion. I think, my opinion, I think he'll start to, if he can get reps, which he should, because I don't really see a huge point of giving, Taylor Heineke a lot more reps over Howell in the off. I know they're going to, because he's going to be QB2, but I'd like Howell get a lot more reps with like the second teamers, because I'd like to see what he can do out there. But I think right now, quarterback depth wise, they're pretty good. They're
pretty good shape. I agree with you there. I agree. And I think Howell landed in an ideal situation, right? So if he was a first round pick, second round pick, third round pick, maybe some more pressure for him. But falling in the fifth round is ideal. He doesn't necessarily have to play even this year. Maybe next year he can maybe get on the field potentially. We'll see how that goes. I think he has the physical talent. I think he's tough as hell. Like I don't think he's going to be a dual threat runner on the professional level. I think he might be more mobile, like, maybe miss when he's getting blitzed. But I don't think he's going to necessarily be like a, RPO kind of guy. But I do think he does have the arm talent. And I think his biggest learning curve, from what I understand, is going to be his processing and kind of developing that pro route tree. Like he's used to that North Carolina, more of like a 1-2 read, more of like a run and shoot kind of offense. So it's gonna be kind of cool to see. He needs to develop his professional perspective. But I think that's great. Sit back, relax. Hopefully, Wentz is a good mentor. We'll see how that goes. But we'll just kind of see. It's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be a good opportunity for him. And hopefully he shows something, and Washington does kind of have someone in the farm system to kind of move on up. And hopefully, we only have 4 years with him. It's kind of different by not having a first round pick, but hopefully he kind of shows us some favor. Again, we took a chance on you. Maybe if he doesn't start till year 2, year 3, he still re-ups with us if he does a good job in the future. But that's a long time from now. So we'll see how that goes. So let me throw some potential money deals at you and see what you think about that. Then you can kind of wrap it up, talk about what you're up to. We can bring it on home. All right. So Mclaren. So Terry McLaurin. Obviously, he's a high interest player for us. He's on our last year of his deal. Would you pay Terry McLaurin $20-25 million per year? How do you feel about that? Do you think he's a priority for Washington? And do you think Washington should sign him? Yes or no?
Hard, because you're not just paying for production. Mm-hmm. You're paying a guy that's the face of your franchise. Situations as a receiver. I don't care who the quarterback here is. Terry McLaurin's the face of the franchise. He's the guy, and he was like this at Ohio State too. When he came out, it was him and the Browns. Hollywood Brown and now the Philadelphia Brown. But I had those guys neck and neck. So Terry McLaurin went in third round to Washington. I was ecstatic. So you're talking about what he did on the college level is all the dirty things, all the things that the star receivers don't do. We talk about Campbell that he played with, went to Indianapolis. He benefited from McLaurin. What's he doing? Because he doesn't have a guy like that. So I think a guy that can do the run game can be a blocker and basically just willing to leave it all on the field. I think that everyone's talking about the money. In another 2 years, this money is not going to be anything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
it's going to be out of the top 10 within 2 years. If they pay him anywhere between 22 to 25 million, just think of that. Within 2 years,
the Amazon deal and all this other stuff coming down the pike, it's going to blow up anyway. So I agree with you there. Yeah, 100 funny money. Exactly right.
When it comes to the NFL, because although they do have that cap line, we've seen it. It all can be easily manipulated. So, who on Washington right now do they have to pay? You know, there has been so much money dedicated to the defensive side of the
Yeah, so
ball.
freeze for a second. The next question is going to be Daron Payne. Would you pay Daron Payne?
Right. Daron Payne, no. You know, and
Okay.
again, and I'm an Alabama fan, but I think from all indications that I'm hearing, you know, we'll see what kind of, you know, year he has, but you're talking about upwards to 13, 15 plus million.
Yeah, something around there because, you know, John Allen got 18, so he's probably going to ask for something pretty close to that. So
Right.
you'll
And
see.
I don't see how you can pay two interior guys that kind of money, because I think you have Chase Young, but then you have the more immediate concern is Montez Sweat.
Agreed.
I think, you know, I thought about last year, and, you know, who could predict, you know, with the broken jaw and the freak things that he had happen. Now, I had a breakout season, and I still believe it. I think he leads the
I
team.
agree. I think Sweat. I think personally, I think Sweat's toe to toe with Chase Young. Like Chase Young gets all the credentials and all the hoorah and things like that. Montez Sweat is a physical freak. He can do just the same thing as like if they should be neck and neck in regard to production, in my opinion. So we'll see how that actually goes. But sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
You're the Payne or Sweat, so that's what it comes down to. I don't see a scenario where you're going to pay both of them, because that just all that money locked on the defensive line. There does have to be, you know, some semblance of balance where the money is being allocated. So again, Terry McLaurin, Carson Wentz, you have that money there. Then the defensive side of the ball, Allen, Sweat, and then, you know, like I said, Young will come up on that contract. But, you know, what will they do with Payne? At this point, if they let him go, you know, that's why they got Mathis. You know, they would get that third comprehensive pick. But I think that would be, you know, a loss. I think they should try to move him, but I think they're more banking on that, you know, maybe he has a great year. But I don't know. That's
I agree. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, kind of follow everybody, they're kind of saying like in Daron Payne, he wants to come back, but you know, it might not work out. I think it's going to be like one last year into the sunset, kind of see how that goes. I mean, potentially maybe franchise tag him if they really want to go that route, but you know, we'll see how it ends going.
right.
So Adam, we're approaching the 1 hour mark, man. So let's talk about what kind of upcoming projects you have and what's going on, and kind of find out where can people find you on, you know, Twitter, break it down, or sorry, on social media. What do you got going on?
Follow me at Twitter's the B&G Report. Same with Instagram. Just find me at the Burgundy and Gold Report. Just search that. But you know, we talked about earlier on my website. You know, I've been doing this now for 6 years, but this is the second year of the website. We're having an awesome year. But now by subscribing to our website, you become a premium member. It costs nothing. As soon as I publish my articles, you automatically get emailed them. You know, you don't have to wait for social media to get posted, because, you know, getting all all my articles social media, you know, that takes time, so it can be a couple. So, you know, just by signing up, all it asks for is email, no cost. You know, you get our articles. But from there, you know, I'm going to go through our draft picks. I'm doing, you know, like I said, continue through the draft. It's the same scenarios. I'm going through each of our picks. I start with the offensive guys, and then I'll go to the defensive side of the ball. I'll watch, you know, all their 2021 film, and, you know, in between, you know, I'll have different article pieces. I have an article coming about a, you know, a pre-camp look at the wide receiver situation. You know, we'll talk about Terry McLaurin, you know, some of the money that he could be earning, you know, some of the guys like De'Ami Brown, Cam Sims, you know, what kind of roles that, you know, they might have, because, you know, we're talking about, you know, Samuels and, you know, the hot rookie that we have, but, you know, there's going to be roles for those guys. But no, we're going to have a lot of content coming out. You know, as always, you know, I have the B&G Report Happy Hour on YouTube, so you can subscribe to that. But yeah, you know, the Burgundy and Gold Report, you know, all my links are there. You know, just check me out there. Like I said, 365. I do this all year round.
And no question, I can vouch for Adam too, man. It's like, as you guys know, I consume all Washington products, man, all Washington Commanders. I'm always trying to read more and more. And I actually did subscribe to Adam's webpage. And basically, you know, I'll be sitting there and, you know, it'd be 6 o'clock in the morning, boom, email, Adam Aniba got a new article popping up. I'm like, all right, cool. Drinking coffee and I read something new. And it's kind of cool because Adam has a different perspective. And it's nice because, you know, sometimes you kind of hear from the mainstream cycle. It's always one perspective, one viewpoint. It's kind of cool hearing that grassroots perspective, that deeper perspective. And Adam kind of looks at other perspectives like HBCUs and things like that. So it's kind of cool. So I do appreciate Adam's work. And Adam, man, we got to catch up again soon. It's kind of fun. It's easy. You know, it's been 2 weeks in a row now. We've been talking. Let's keep it up, man. It's a good time. So let's get it going. And for everyone listening, it's George Carmi at GCarmi21. I work for Full Press Coverage, and basically this is the Full Press Full Press Commanders podcast. Thank you for listening. Talk to you guys soon. All right, guys, have a good night.
Good going. Take it easy.
Peace.